All right, so we're gonna make a couple little videos off of one car today. We got this 2011 Cadillac DTS. You'll see there's a little puddle on the ground. That's irrelevant to what we're doing. I did a water pump previously on this and forgot to tighten a band clamp on one of the hoses, so I'll do that when I'm all done. But we are going to do brakes and we are going to do struts. So depending on which video you're on, you'll be seeing one of those two things, but it all starts the same. So I'm going to kind of do it at once and hopefully get somewhat of a coherent video out of this for both of those things. So step number one is going to be get your car in the air, support it. If you don't have a lift, which you probably don't, just put it on a jack stand. There's a jack point. It's marked underneath the bottom of the frame here. We're going to get the tire off. The lug nuts are 19 millimeters. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot those off and then we'll get going. Now that you got your tire off, disc brakes are quite easy. We're going to start off. We're going to take off these 13 millimeter caliper bolts. There's one on the top. There's one on the bottom. So I'm going to get these off here, and then we will wiggle this caliper off and set it to this, set it back here in a safe spot so it's not hanging. If you have a bungee cord, you can bungee it up to your strut here. But this one, it actually can sit back on the controller pretty easy. So I'm gonna get these 13s out, we'll get this off, and we'll set it back there. I also want to point out that I will have links in the description to some cool tools you can use that I'll show in a little bit, and the brake pads and hardware. So if you're not in a hurry and you'd like to order those, save a little money and it helps us out. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and push forward and let's get this caliper apart and show you how to do it. So with the caliper off, so depending on where you're at and how long it's been, sometimes they can get pretty stuck on there. You may need to get a screwdriver or pry bar, carefully stick it in here and pry against this bracket. These ones are just wiggling right off by hand, so no problem there. Once you do that, you can pull your old pads out. They just slide right out of these little retainers here. You can do it with your hands. It's a little easier with two hands, but just kind of work them out and pop them out like this, and you can discard these pads because we're going to replace these. That's why we're here. Now we got the pads removed. You're going to want to feel your rotors. So no matter what, in my opinion, you need to go get your rotors turned at the minimum. You can take them off. You can take them to any auto parts store. They'll turn them. I think it's like $25 a rotor or $30 a rotor. But pads, when they're squeezed in over time, they tend to set into the rotors. So if you want to really reduce your chance of squeaking or having any vibrations, it's super difficult to tell if your rotor's warped at all from getting hot-cold exchange, like driving through water while you're braking. So just get them turned or replace them depending on the cost, but getting them turned is typically the best bet. So another weird thing that I would like to point out, because a lot of people miss this when they do their brakes. So you'll see here, this is one side of the pads. Sorry, it's windy and those doors are loud, but that's one pad and that's another one. You'll see this one's worn down a heck of a lot more than the other one, and I'm going to show you what causes that. So here, these are your caliper slides. This is where your caliper 13 millimeter bolts were, right? You'll see how this one's moving nice and free. This one down here is not moving as freely. I'm having to pull this really hard. So you need to check these slides and make sure they can move freely, because your caliper needs to move slightly whenever you're compressing and decompressing. So I'll pull these out and I'll show you how to re-grease them. These ones aren't super terrible. This one is a little rough. It's loosening up by hand right now, but I'm gonna re-grease them anyway because I like to do that. It's good practice. So at this point, we're gonna move down. We got 15 millimeter bolts. We got one right here, and this will remove this entire bracket. So I'm gonna get those off. These 15s are gonna be extremely tight. They have Loctite on them. So you're gonna need a nice long ratchet or a lot of strength and oomph to break them loose. But once you get them, they'll come right out. All right, here we are. Both the 15s are out, and you'll see here that little red material, that is Loctite. That's what makes them so hard to break loose. But now this part is gonna be dependent on if you are north of Mason-Dixon line or south of it. So they have these little set screws in the rotors on these, and they're a T30 Torx bit. If you are down here where we don't get rust, these things are actually kind of awesome. So you just break them loose and then unscrew it, and it holds the rotor in place, so you're not fighting the rotor while you're putting on the caliper bracket and everything. I'm gonna need two hands to break it loose because it's wanting to spin on me. But if you are north of the Mason-Dixon line with salt, right, these things I hear are a nightmare. They like to rust in there, then they like to strip out, and then you got to drill them out. So a lot of people just discard them. So it's up to you whether or not you want to put it back in, but all the purpose of this set screw is to hold this rotor flush while you set your caliper bracket on and put your brake pads on. It just makes it a lot easier to put everything together without fumbling it and risking scratching up your rotor. Once your tire goes on, it actually will hold this in this exact location without needing this screw. So it's not actually important. A lot of vehicles don't have them. So that's just a little tidbit of information there. But I'm gonna go ahead and pop this off, and then this rotor will slide right off, and we are ready to grease some calipers and put everything back together. All right, so what you're gonna wanna do now that we have the caliper off of the car is you're gonna want to take your hand. Let me see if I can get this on video and do it with one hand. It's kind of tough. Let's see if I put my arm there, maybe. All right, so you take a caliper and you just kind of twist it and pull to get this little rubber off. Then you pull the whole thing out. Now we're gonna clean this with a brake cleaner. I'm gonna squirt just a smidgen in there, dump it out, and then we'll apply some new fresh grease to this and slide it back in and get our little rubber boot in place. So I'll show you the process on the first one, and then I'll just do the next one. All right, so hopefully you can see this here. So I got a paper towel. I'm gonna start by doing the caliper slide. We're just gonna hit it with some brake cleaner. And I'm going to wipe it with a paper towel to get all that old, nasty used grease off of there. Bam. So now that that's done, turn this. So we'll just take a little bit of this down in the hole there, swishy around, and voila. And look how much dirties comes out of there. I mean, obviously grease isn't going to be super clean. You just don't want an overabundance of grease in there because that's bad. So you just do a little spritzer. So while this dries, I'll take this caliper, slide here, and you can use pretty much any type of like red lithium grease. This is moly grease, but red lithium grease will do. Just anything that can handle decent temperatures. It doesn't have to be super fancy or anything. So we just got a nice little coating on here. Nothing too crazy, nothing too thick. You don't want to pack it or anything. You just want it to be able to slide and move. So here you go. That slides back in. Bam. Pop the cap on, and now it moves nice and easy and freely. All right, here we are. New rotor's in. If you got your turned rotor, your old rotor, doesn't really matter. If you're going to use your set screw, make sure you line the hole up, and this is literally what it's for. We got it tightened up, it's ready to go. So now we can slide the bracket back on. Make sure you re-Loctite your bolts. So I'm going to clean these off, put some new fresh blue Loctite on the threads, and then we'll get our bracket put back in and tightened down. So now that we got our caliper bracket back on, make sure you get these nice and tight, even with the Loctite. I mean, I gave it like a good ugga-dugga. So now for the next step, which is just something where not all brake pad sets are created equal, but this is quite important in my mind, is you want to replace these little metal, they have like a fancy name for them. They're just like caliper brackets. These Wagner pads that we got as replacements here, they come with new ones, but sometimes I get them from O'Reilly's and they don't come with new ones, or somebody will bring some from wherever. And yeah, but I'll make sure I put these Wagners in the description, and I'll pop them up on the screen here, and they do come with these new clips. So I'm gonna put these in here. It's super simple. You just line them up and voila, click them in just like that. Make sure they're not touching the rotor. They are not. We are good. So now we are going to pop off the bottom one and replace that one, and then I'll show you the next little trick. Okay, so now that we got our new little brackets in here, these Wagner brakes even give you this moly brake lube, but you can use really any old little bit of grease. So with the new manufacturing of brakes, I mean, when I say new, it's been for quite a while now, people have a hard time getting them not to squeak. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. I know a lot of guys who just, at this point, full send the pads and let it rip. But you can put a little bit of grease down here in these little metal brackets, and that really helps out with that. So we're gonna go ahead and just smidgen it. Be very careful not to get it on the face of your rotor, because if you get a bunch of grease here, your brakes will pinch and then it will embed it in your rotors. They're not gonna work nearly as good. So you be very careful. You just kind of get it out here on this outer edge with your finger without getting to that rotor, and then we'll slide our pads in and it will drag it the rest of the way. The leg of your pad will never hit the rotor, so that's not going to be an issue. Just don't pile it on very thick, very thin layer right up here. That's all. A dab will do you. A dab will do you. All right, so there you go. Once you got the little grease in your edges, you can press your pad down and just slide it in. Then what I like to do is I just rotated the rotor over, and you'll see I got a little fingerprints here. I also make sure there's no grease on it. If you get a little bit of either in it, No big deal at this stage. You just spray it off with some brake cleaner like that. Got my fingerprints off as well. And we'll just go down the backside to be safe here. So now we have one final step before we're ready to put the tire on. That is reinstalling the caliper here, which I wedged and tossed back there. Now I'm gonna show you one more little trick and a cool nifty tool, which I will also put down in the description. This is a brake caliper depressor. You don't have to have this. If you have a C-clamp, you can take the old brake pad, flip it over, stick it in here, and use a C-clamp to squeeze it. But boy, if you have more than one car and you do your own brakes, or you do more brakes more often, this thing's a freaking godsend. So look, you literally just drop it in here, right? It has a little ratcheting handle for each direction. So now you can just put your finger on it to tighten it, and it will spread. And once it gets snug, you just kind of take it over. Make sure you have the cap off of your brake fluid whenever you do your calipers. Gosh, this is hard to do while filming. All right, here we go. So now I got it all the way down, back compressed. You reach down, flip the lever. Now it's ratcheting in the other direction. Voila. You just unratchet it just like that. And now you can slide it out, and they are compressed. All right, so now that once it's compressed, you just make sure you pay attention to your brake line up there. You don't get it twisted. Just slide your caliper back on. Get it on the right side of these tabs here like that, so it lines up. And now we're putting our bolts back in. So I put a little bit of blue Loctite on these as well. They don't come with it from the factory, but it ain't gonna hurt. And I like safety first. So we are gonna get these started, and then we'll shoot them tight, and we will be ready to put our wheel back on. Here we are. We are ready to put the tire back on. Everything is back together, nice and tight. Now this is a good time to do one last check. Just make sure you don't see any grease or dirties. A lot of times if you buy new rotors from the auto parts store, it'll have like machine oil on it. So you gotta clean all that off with brake cleaner, get it nice and clean. But otherwise, this thing is ready for a tire. And then you put your brake cap back on and make sure you pump your brakes before you go for a drive, just to make them re-engage. But simple as that. If the video helped you out, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to see more repair videos or weird custom builds we're doing, hit the subscribe button.